I don't talk about this much. I know it sounds crazy, but I've kept it in for years. And maybe it's time someone heard it. The year was 2016, late September, around the Cascades. The rain was relentless, pouring down harder than it had any right to. I can still smell the damp earth and the wet stone in that cave. We were on a routine mining trip, the three of us. We had our gear and everything we thought we'd need. But the ground, it shifted. The air suddenly got thick. There was this pressure in the cave, like the walls were alive. And then it happened. I heard it. A knock. Not the rock kind. This was too heavy, too deliberate, like something was warning us. I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a branch breaking. I'd heard the stories, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, but I didn't believe them. Not at first. Not until we heard it again. That sound. 3 knocks. The same. And that's when I knew. We weren't alone. It was a regular workday. Nothing out of the ordinary for us miners. Just another job in the Cascade Mountains. The weather was heavy, but nothing we hadn't handled before. Mike, Ben, and I were just going through our usual motions, checking equipment, making sure we had enough provisions, all the while talking about the usual things. Life, the land, the jobs we'd had before this one, the families waiting back home. As we headed down into the cave, everything felt normal. The routine was comfortable, almost boring. We'd been working this site for 3 months without incident, just copper deposits and limestone formations. Nothing remarkable. But as soon as we got deep enough, past the 3rd chamber where the light from outside disappeared completely, that's when I noticed it. The stillness. It wasn't just the rain stopping. It was the silence inside. Like the cave had swallowed the world outside. No drips, no echoes, nothing. Mike joked that maybe we'd gone deaf from the drilling. Ben laughed, but it sounded hollow in that quiet. That's when we heard it. A knock. I brushed it off at first. Could have been anything. A rock settling. The mountain adjusting. We were 200 feet underground. Things shift, but something about the way it echoed made my heart skip. It was too clean, too precise, not the random clatter of falling stone. This was measured. 3 seconds between the sound and the silence that followed. I looked at Mike. He'd heard it too. His hand had frozen on his pickaxe. Ben kept working, oblivious, humming some song from the radio. That was mistake number 1. We should have left then. We were deeper in now. The air was thicker, and the light from our helmets didn't seem to travel as far. The beams just stopped about 15 feet out, swallowed by the dark. That's when I started to notice the oddities. The way the rocks seemed too smooth in places, like they'd been worn down by something moving past them regularly. The patterns in the dirt weren't random scattering. They looked deliberate. Paths, almost. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me from the isolation. We'd been down here for 6 hours. The brain does funny things underground, creates patterns where there aren't any, sees faces in shadows. But then it happened again. A knock. Louder this time. Closer. The sound came from somewhere behind us, back toward the entrance chamber. This time it didn't sound like a falling rock or settling earth. This was intentional, purposeful, like someone or something was testing the walls, finding the resonance points. Ben had heard it too because he went pale and his jaw tightened. He set down his equipment carefully. Too carefully. "You think it's the thing in the woods?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light. He was joking, but I wasn't sure if I was supposed to laugh. Mike didn't respond. He was staring back into the darkness. His headlamp beam cut through the dust we'd kicked up, creating a cone of visibility that ended in absolute black. Nothing moved in that light, nothing we could see. But something was there. I felt it the way you feel a storm coming. The pressure change, the weight in the air. We stayed frozen for maybe 2 minutes, listening, waiting for another sound. When it didn't come, we tried to go back to work. but none of us could focus. Every scrape of metal on stone made us jump. Every shift of our boots on the cave floor sounded too loud. By the time we stopped for lunch, none of us had said more than 5 words. We ate our sandwiches in silence, sitting on the cold stone floor. The quiet pressed in from all sides. It was around midnight when the ground began to shake. We decided to camp in the cave rather than make the climb back out in the dark and rain. Small tremors at first, barely noticeable, then stronger ones that made our equipment rattle against the walls. We tried to move, gathering our gear, but it was as if the earth was holding us there. Each time we stood, another tremor hit and sent us back down. The knocks kept coming during the shaking, echoing through the rock, impossible to ignore now. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more. The pattern was consistent, deliberate. The last one was so close it rattled the bones in my chest. I felt it in my teeth. It wasn't just in the cave. It was outside too, traveling through the mountain itself. And then the smell hit us, all at once, like a wave. Musky, damp like wet fur, but mixed with something more primal, something ancient. The smell of an animal, but not quite. Deeper, earthier. It filled the cave and made my eyes water. We froze, all of us. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ben's breathing got shallow and quick. Panic breathing. Mike grabbed his flashlight and swept it around the chamber, but the beam caught nothing except our own shadows on the walls. The smell got stronger, so strong I could taste it on my tongue. That's when Ben whispered it. This is where they say it happens. Sasquatch. Bigfoot. The word hit me like a stone. No one spoke that name here. Not aloud. Not in these mountains. It was bad luck. Or worse. But now we were saying it. Naming it. Making it real. Bigfoot. I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to believe it wasn't true. That we were just spooked miners in a dark cave during a storm. That the smell was some animal that had died in the tunnels. That the knocks were just the mountains settling. But the other part of me, the part that grew up hearing stories from old-timers in bars, the part that had seen things in the woods that couldn't be explained, that part knew better. The knocks kept coming, 3 at a time, like a code, like communication. We decided to stay put. No sense in trying to leave when the rain was still pouring down, and we had no way to climb back out of the cave safely. The entrance was slick with water and mud. One wrong step, and you'd slide right off the ridge. That was when the real tension started. The atmosphere in the cave thickened, became heavier. The air itself felt charged, like before lightning strikes. I swear I could feel something watching us. Not just watching, studying, learning. When I glanced over at Mike, his eyes were wide and fixed on something in the dark. His whole body had gone rigid. I turned slowly. There was nothing there, at least not that I could see, just darkness beyond our lights. But I heard it, a low guttural growl, deep and far from human, too deep for any animal I knew. It resonated in my chest cavity. I thought I was hearing things until I saw Mike's face. He'd heard it too. His hand was gripping his pickaxe so hard his knuckles had gone white. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. I didn't answer, couldn't answer. My throat had closed up. The growl came again, longer this time. It started low and rose in pitch slightly, then cut off abruptly. We sat there in complete silence for what felt like hours. None of us slept. We took turns keeping watch. But honestly, what were we watching for? What could we do if something came? We were trapped in a cave with one exit, 200 feet underground. Our phones had no signal. The radio we'd brought for emergencies was back at base camp, a mile away through the woods. We were completely alone, except we weren't alone. That was the problem. Around 3 in the morning, Ben started talking, just rambling really, about a documentary he'd watched, about Bigfoot sightings in the Pacific Northwest, about how some researcher had collected thousands of reports from these mountains. I told him to shut up. Mike told him to shut up, but he kept talking anyway. I think he needed to hear a human voice, even if it was his own. The alternative, Listening to that silence was worse. We made it through the night. Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering down through the cave entrance. The rain had stopped, the tremors had stopped, and the knocks had stopped too. The next morning, after the storm died down, we decided to explore, if only to find a better escape. Route or maybe a secondary exit we'd missed on the maps. We needed to feel like we had options, like we weren't cornered. But that's when we saw it, a footprint. Fresh, pressed into the soft mud near the back chamber where we'd heard the growling. It was too big to be human, far too wide. The thing that got me wasn't just the size. It had to be at least 18 inches long and 7 inches wide. It was the depth. Whatever made this print weighed significantly more than any of us. And it had been walking around in here, moving through our campsite while we slept, or tried to sleep. I knelt down next to it, my hand hovering over the impression. 5 toes. Distinct heel, the ball of the foot pressed deepest. This was a walking creature, bipedal. Mike took photos with his phone even though we had no way to send them anywhere. We followed the trail of prints, each one deeper than the last, like whatever made them was gaining confidence, getting bolder. They led us through a narrow passage we'd marked as too unstable to explore, then into the back of the cave where the ceiling dropped to about 5 feet. We had to crouch to follow. The prints continued for another 30 feet before they just stopped. Not at a wall, not at a dead end. They just stopped in the middle of the tunnel, like whatever made them had simply vanished, or climbed. I looked up. The ceiling here was rough with handholds. Something could have gone up. Ben swore under his breath. "That's a Bigfoot. Those are damn Sasquatch tracks." I wanted to argue. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say it was a bear standing on its hind legs or some hoax or anything else, but the footprint spoke for itself. The depth, the spacing, the pattern. We didn't know what we were dealing with, but we knew it was real. It was in this cave with us, had been for hours, and we'd been completely helpless. That knowledge settled in my stomach like a stone. We headed back to our gear without speaking. None of us wanted to stay in that back tunnel any longer than necessary. That evening, as the light started to fail outside, we heard it again. The growl. But this time it was closer. So close I could feel it in my chest. Could feel the vibration of it moving through the rock. Ben wanted to check it out. Said we needed to know what we were up against. Mike and I couldn't move. I was glued to my spot in the corner, my back pressed against the cold stone wall. And that's when it happened. A massive shape appeared in the dim light of our flashlights. The beams caught it for just a second before it moved back into shadow. Tall, maybe 7 feet, maybe more. Dark, impossibly wide across the shoulders. The silhouette was impossible to miss. It was like nothing I had ever seen. Not a bear. Not a person. Something else entirely. I froze, not daring to breathe. Every muscle in my body locked up. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. It didn't fit into any category I had. And then, for the first time, I whispered, "It. Bigfoot." The word hung in the air like an accusation, like naming it would make it more real, or less. I wasn't sure which I wanted, but it wasn't fear I felt now. It was something else, something I couldn't explain. Awe, maybe. Respect. This wasn't just some monster from campfire stories. This thing was real, flesh and blood and breathing. It existed. Mike's flashlight beam caught it again, briefly. I saw fur, dark brown, almost black, matted and thick. I saw the shape of a massive arm, muscles moving beneath the fur, and then it was gone again, melted back into the darkness. We stayed frozen for what felt like an hour, but was probably only minutes. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The creature didn't either. It was just there, somewhere in the dark. Waiting. Watching. I became acutely aware of every sound we made, our breathing, the rustle of our clothes, the scrape of Mike's boots on stone when he finally shifted his weight. Every noise felt too loud, like we were announcing our presence to something that already knew exactly where we were. Eventually, Ben turned off his flashlight. Then Mike. I followed suit. We sat in complete darkness. It seemed safer somehow. If we couldn't see it, maybe it couldn't see us. But that was stupid. Whatever this thing was, it clearly knew these caves better than we did. It could probably see in the dark, could probably hear our heartbeats, could smell the fear coming off us in waves. The word kept echoing in my head. Bigfoot, Bigfoot, Bigfoot. I'd said it out loud and now I couldn't unsay it. The silence that followed was suffocating. The creature, or whatever it was, didn't move, didn't make another sound, at least not one we could hear. We were paralyzed in that moment, not daring to breathe, each of us locked in our own heads, processing what we'd just seen, what we thought we'd seen. In the dark, it's easy to doubt your own eyes, to tell yourself it was shadows or exhaustion or fear playing tricks. But all three of us had seen it. That made it real. And then it happened. The thing made a noise. A low grunt, followed by what sounded like a sigh. Almost human, but not quite. The tone was wrong. The depth was wrong. It was almost like it was tired, like it had been here a long time and we were disturbing its peace. We could feel the ground vibrating as it moved again. Slow, careful steps. It wasn't running, wasn't charging, just moving through its territory. We were the intruders here. This time I couldn't help myself. I looked toward the sound. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness enough to see shape and shadow. And there were its eyes. 2 points of reflection when Mike's flashlight flickered back on for just a second. Dark and unreadable. Not red like in the movies, just dark, deep, ancient. I can't say much more about what I saw. I don't even know if it saw me. But I felt it. A presence, a consciousness, a force of nature that had existed in these mountains long before we came and would exist long after. We left, and I realized then, in that moment of connection, it wasn't here to harm us. It wasn't an enemy. It wasn't a monster. It was just living, just existing. We'd stumbled into its home and it was letting us know. The knocks had been warnings. The growls had been communication. This was its cave, its mountain, and we needed to understand that. Ben must have felt the same thing because he slowly lowered his pickaxe. Mike turned off his flashlight again. We sat in the darkness with this creature, with Bigfoot, for hours. The atmosphere changed. The tension eased. Not completely, but enough. Enough that I could breathe normally again. Enough that my muscles unclenched. Whatever this was, whatever was happening, it wasn't a threat. Not immediately. Not now. I still don't know how I knew that. Instinct, maybe. Or something deeper. Some animal part of my brain recognizing another apex predator and understanding the rules of engagement. We had acknowledged each other. Now we would coexist. For tonight, at least. For the next few hours, we didn't move. We stayed absolutely still, listening, waiting, existing in this strange stalemate with something that shouldn't exist, but clearly did. Nothing happened. No sounds, no movement, just the air, thick with anticipation. The darkness pressed in from all sides. I kept staring at the same spot in the cave where I'd last seen the shape, watching the shadows dance when someone's flashlight beam passed over. But the creature, the Bigfoot, didn't show itself again. I could still hear the growl in my ears, could still feel the vibration of its movement through the stone. It wasn't gone. It never really left. I knew that somehow. Could sense its presence the way you sense someone watching you from across a room. That prickle on the back of your neck, that awareness. Mike had pulled out his notebook at some point and was writing, in the dark, just putting pen to paper and moving his hand. He told me later he was documenting everything. Times, sounds, observations. Like keeping a record would somehow make it more manageable, more real, or less real. I'm still not sure. Ben had his eyes closed, but I knew he wasn't sleeping. His breathing was too careful, too controlled. He was listening. We all were. The mountain had sounds we'd never noticed before. The settling of rock, the movement of water somewhere deep below, the wind finding its way through cracks and crevices, and underneath it all, every now and then, a sound that didn't belong. A footstep, a breath, the scrape of something moving against stone, too big to be a rat, too deliberate to be random, too close to be our imagination. I found myself thinking about the stories, the ones I'd heard growing up, the ones I'd dismissed as drunk talk and campfire tales, loggers who'd seen something in the trees, hikers who'd found prints, hunters who'd heard calls that didn't match any known animal, rangers who wouldn't go into certain areas after dark. I'd laughed at those stories, thought the people telling them were either lying or stupid or both. Now I understood. They weren't lying. They were protecting something, protecting the truth because the truth was too big, too strange, too impossible to explain to people who hadn't experienced it, and that's what I would become. Another person with a story no one would believe. Another witness who'd keep quiet rather than face the mockery, rather than face the questions I couldn't answer. How do you explain that Bigfoot is real? How do you prove it when your only evidence is a shaky photo of a footprint and the memory of two eyes in the darkness? It was then that the real decision came. The cave, our only safe space, was becoming too small, too cramped. The walls seemed to be pressing in. We needed to leave, needed to get out, needed fresh air and sunlight and the normal world. But the way out was blocked. When we'd settled in for the night, we hadn't noticed the rock fall near the entrance. The tremors must have loosened something. Now there was a pile of debris blocking most of the passage. We could still squeeze through if we tried, if we left our equipment behind, if we went one at a time, if we were desperate enough. We tried to push through, tried to move the smaller rocks and create a gap wide enough for our bodies. But the entrance had collapsed even more since we'd checked it last. Every rock we moved seemed to bring down two more. Mike wanted to keep trying, said we could dig our way out. But Ben pulled him back, told him we'd bring the whole mountain down on ourselves if we weren't careful. And that's when we heard it. The knock, 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. Not just once, 3 times in succession. Knock, 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 then pause, then 3 more. Knock, knock, knock. The pattern was unmistakable now. This was communication. This was language. As if to say, stay, wait, don't go yet. It wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. The rocks were unstable. We'd die trying to force our way through. And somehow, this creature, this Bigfoot living in these mountains, knew that, understood that, was trying to tell us. I looked at Mike. He looked at Ben. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but we were thinking the same thing. We were being protected, warned away from danger by something that should have been our biggest threat, by something that could have killed us at any point during the night but chose not to, chose instead to keep us safe. The reversal was too much to process. My brain kept trying to make sense of it, kept trying to fit this experience into categories that made logical sense. Predator, prey, threat, safety. But Bigfoot didn't fit any of those. It existed outside them, in its own space, playing by its own rules. We set up camp again, pulled our sleeping bags back out, rationed our remaining food and water. If we were stuck here, we'd make the best of it. Wait for the rocks to stabilize. Wait for rescue if it came. Wait for whatever happened. Next, the 3 knocks came again that night. Softer this time. Almost gentle. Like a good night. Like acknowledgement. We were sharing this space now. This cave. This moment. Us and something the world said didn't exist. With no choice but to wait it out, we set up a more permanent camp in the corner. Hours turned into a full day. Then another night. Then another day. We lost track of time down there. The darkness made everything stretch, made minutes feel like hours feel like days. And I could feel the presence of the creature just beyond our reach, watching, protecting, never visible but always there. I'd catch glimpses sometimes, a shadow moving differently than it should, a shape in the peripheral, the reflection of eyes when the light hit just right. It never came closer, never entered our small circle of safety, but it circled, patrolled, like it was standing guard, keeping something else out, or keeping us in. I couldn't tell which. Mike started leaving food at the edge of our camp. Little offerings, part of a sandwich, some trail mix, a granola bar. He said it was to show we meant no harm, to build trust. The food was always gone in the morning. I couldn't help but wonder, why hadn't it attacked? What did it want? What did it know that we didn't? These mountains held secrets. That much was clear. How many other creatures lived here? How many other impossible things were real? And if Bigfoot existed, what else existed? What other stories were true? The thought spiraled out, made me question everything I thought I knew, about nature, about reality, about the space between what we believe and what actually is. Days underground will do that to you. Break down your certainty, strip away your assumptions, leave you raw and open to possibilities you'd have laughed at before. I don't know all the answers. I probably never will. All I know is it never came closer than 20 feet. It never harmed us, never tried to. But every now and then I'd catch a glimpse of it, a flash of movement, the sound of breathing that wasn't ours. It was there, watching, listening, just like we were, and somehow that was enough. Somehow that was okay. We'd reached an understanding, an agreement. We wouldn't hurt it. It wouldn't hurt us. We'd share this space until we could leave, until the rocks settled and the way was clear. On the third night, or what I thought was the third night, Ben started talking to it, just speaking into the darkness, telling it about his life, his family, his daughter who was starting school, his wife who worried when he went on these trips. I thought he'd lost it, that the isolation had broken him. But then Mike started talking too, telling stories, sharing memories, and I realized what they were doing. They were making us human, reminding this creature, this Bigfoot, that we were more than intruders. We were people, with lives, with families, with stories of our own, and maybe it understood, maybe it didn't, but it felt right, felt necessary. So I talked too. Told it about my son, about teaching him to fish, about my father's farm, about the life waiting for me above ground. My voice echoed in the cave, and somewhere in the darkness, I swear I heard something listening. When the rescue team finally arrived, we were already half delirious from exhaustion. They took us out of that cave. Paramedics checked us over. Sheriff asked questions. None of us mentioned Bigfoot. None of us mentioned the knocks or the footprints or the presence. We said there'd been a collapse, said we'd waited for help, said we'd rationed our supplies and stayed calm. The official report called it a successful rescue operation. 3 miners trapped by rockfall, safe after 4 days. No injuries, no complications, just another story of people beating the odds. But the memory stayed with me, stayed with all of us. I could see it in Mike's eyes when they let us out, in the way Ben kept looking back at the cave entrance. We'd left something behind in there. Part of ourselves, maybe. Or part of our old understanding of the world. I kept thinking, I should have left the cave. I should have done something. Should have documented it better. Should have tried harder to prove what we'd experienced. But now, years later, I can't help but wonder if it was watching us leave. Standing somewhere in the deep tunnels, observing as we climbed out and walked away, maybe wondering if we'd keep the secret, if we'd protect it the way it had protected us. Bigfoot. The word still feels heavy in my mouth, still feels like something I shouldn't say out loud. We didn't know it then, but we were part of its world now, had been touched by something ancient and wild, something that chose mercy when it could have chosen violence, and it was protecting something, its home, maybe, its territory, or just itself, just its right to exist without human interference, without hunters and cameras and crowds. I can't explain it fully, can't make sense of it even now, The rational part of my brain still tries to deny it, still looks for alternative explanations. But the part of me that was in that cave, that felt the vibrations of its movement, that saw its eyes in the darkness, that part knows with absolute certainty that Bigfoot is real, that it lives in these mountains, that it's been there longer than any of us and will be there long after. We stopped talking about it after a while. Mike, Ben, me. We'd meet for drinks sometimes and the subject would hang in the air between us, but we never said it, never spoke the name. It was an unspoken agreement, a pact. We'd keep the secret, protect the creature that had protected us, let it live in peace. I still have the footage. I know I shouldn't have it. Mike took a few seconds of video on that second night, when the shape moved past our camp. It's shaky, blurry, barely visible. The compression from the phone's low-light sensor makes it look like almost nothing. But it's there, that shadow, that movement, the presence. You can see something bipedal, something large, something that shouldn't exist but does. I've never shared it with anyone, not even the rescue team, not my family, not the researchers who sometimes call asking if I've ever seen anything unusual in the Cascades. I don't think I ever will. I don't need to prove anything. What I saw in that cave is mine and Mike's and Ben's. It's something we'll carry forever, the knowledge that the world is bigger than we thought. Stranger. More full of mystery, proving it would only bring hunters, would bring cameras and scientists and people who'd turn that mountain into a circus, would put that creature, that Bigfoot, in danger. And after it kept us safe for 4 days in the darkness, I owe it more than that. We all do. The video sits on a hard drive in my closet, encrypted, password protected. Sometimes I watch it late at night when I can't sleep, when I start to doubt my own memory, when the rational world tries to convince me it was all exhaustion and fear and imagination. I watch those few seconds of footage and I remember the smell, the knocks, the eyes, the feeling of being in the presence of something wild and old, something that predates our cities and roads and electric lights, something that exists in the spaces we've forgotten about, the deep forests, the hidden caves, the mountains too remote for casual hikers. Bigfoot exists there, in those margins, in those gaps, and maybe that's where it should stay. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I hear those 3 knocks again. I don't know if it's real. Don't know if it's just my mind playing tricks, but it's there. And every time I hear it, I remember the creature in the cave, Bigfoot. And I remember what it felt like to be so close to something I couldn't understand, something that felt as real as the earth beneath my feet, something that to this day I can't quite explain. I hate even saying its name, but I say it anyway. Bigfoot. Because it deserves to be acknowledged, deserves to have its existence recognized, even if only by the 3 of us who know, even if only in whispers, even if the world never believes.